So thank you again for attending today's information session on how the insurance industry can rally together to attract bright new talent. Valen has launched tomorrow's Talent Challenge excuse me, as a collaborative initiative, and we're pleased to have our honored guests from Change the Equation as the featured speakers. Change the Equation is the nation's premier organization helping the private sector connect the dots between science, technology, engineering, and math education, otherwise known as STEM, and then building the workforce pipeline. We are very pleased to see the response to this initial initiative that we have announced and to attending today's information session as indicated by the companies you see on the screen who have registered to participate today. So just to review the agenda, I will start off, Kirsten Marr, VP of Marketing for Valen Analytics, and I will start off with an overview of tomorrow's Talent Challenge. And then we're really pleased to have David Coons from the Jacobson Group, who will share the latest stats on the insurance talent shortage and where we stand from a recruiting perspective. And then we will hand it over to our featured guest speakers, Buffy Debra-Watts and Dr. Klaus Van Zastro from Change the Equation. Then finally, as I noted earlier, we'll have a discussion, Q&A, and talk about next steps. So there are at least two big drivers requiring insurance to recruit new, fresh talent to the industry. You know, one, we have an aging workforce and the most tenured people are nearing retirement. And two, the industry is making significant and increasing investments to incorporate advanced data and analytics. And to address these trends, insurance companies need to attract more talent to the industry. And so there are two primary questions we are looking to address with tomorrow's Talent Challenge. The first is, will the best talent choose insurance? And we know from looking at the research on millennials, they ask themselves the following questions on the screen when evaluating job offers. And so our assumption going into this is that the insurance industry probably isn't doing as good of a job offering compelling answers to these questions as companies like Facebook, Google, Starbucks, and Walmart, just to name a few. And of course, other industries like the top performing hedge funds on Wall Street will certainly win out when it comes to comparing compensation potential. So the answer is, what do we do as an industry? And there are many examples of companies banding together to solve industry-wide issues, the most iconic of which is the Got Milk campaign. The example is relevant not because we need a consumer TV ad campaign, but because of why a group of milk producers joined forces. In the early 90s, California's milk producers came together to address a 30-year decline in milk sales. And they had done other ad campaigns that helped consumers equate milk with a healthy lifestyle, but it did nothing to move the needle in terms of sales. So what they faced has interesting parallels for us. Through their research, they determined that for young kids and teens, milk was simply not cool. So other beverage companies were innovating and targeting the 12 to 18 demographics. Packaging was big in terms of innovation and much more cool than milk's cardboard box. And several huge brand campaigns were taking off. Gatorade was using Michael Jordan, Sprite had the Obey Your Thirst campaign, and Snapple had just come on big to the scene. And so that's what inspired California's milk producers to reinvent their brand image and find creative ways to reach young people and reverse their long-term trend of declining sales. So that's the first question. The second question we want to answer with tomorrow's Talent Challenge is whether there is enough qualified talent out there to fill our open positions, recognizing we are competing for this talent. So as Valen started to think about it, we began talking to Change the Equation because, as I said, they are the nation's preeminent organization that helps companies understand how to build a reliable workforce pipeline in a scalable and measurable way. And working with them, we were inspired to start tomorrow's Talent Challenge as a framework for the industry to leverage, which we launched a couple of weeks ago at the Insurance Analytics Symposium in Boston. And executive recruiting firm, the Jacobson Group, is a leader helping carriers attract and develop the young talent entering the workforce. And Jacobson has great experience helping carriers work collaboratively to attract talent to the insurance industry. And so now I'm going to turn things over to Dave Coons from the Jacobson Group for the latest on the talent shortage. So Dave, if you wouldn't mind getting started and just giving the folks a bit of an introduction to you.
Great. Thank you, Kirsten, and thanks to everyone who's taken the time to join us today. Kirsten, I just want to make sure, can you see my slides okay?
Not yet.
All right. How about now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's an honor and a privilege to partner with Valen Analytics and change the equation on such an important and meaningful initiative. It's just a short introduction for those who may not know the Jacobson Group. We are a global executive search and staffing firm that connects insurance talent with companies throughout the industry. For nearly a decade now, we've all been predicting a severe talent shortage that's likely to occur due to an aging workforce population. And you know, the impending skills gap that will result as baby boomers retire is becoming a serious concern that requires all of us to take an active role in changing the course of our future. For our part, the Jacobson Emerging Talent Program is dedicated to providing bright young talent to the insurance industry. With almost half of our workforce expected to retire within the next 15 years, this program is designed to guide recent grads and young professionals to our clients' doorstep by educating them about long-term career opportunities that correlate with their interests in their field of study. So our mission is to raise awareness about all the things the insurance sector has to offer and change any misconceptions that may occur or may already be in place among young millennials. So let's talk about our current state real quickly. This is an overview of where the talent landscape seems to be today. The good news is our industry is expected to add about 200,000 new jobs over the next 7 years. But unfortunately, the bad news is that we expect to lose half or more of our entire workforce through retirement in just 15 years. So we've got a serious concern on our hands. And the impact of this on the industry is not really known. But unless we begin to grow and develop young talent, we certainly will be at a terrible disadvantage as our knowledge base shrinks and we continue to lose talent to competing industries. Some of those you already mentioned, Kirsten. Here's what we know for sure. Over 40% of all recent college grads within the last 3 years are still unemployed. So while there's talent out there, it's still up to us to actively work to capture and nurture it. We simply cannot let high rates of unemployment, though, lull us into a false sense of security, thinking that it's always going to be there when we need it or want it. Millennials, primarily those between the ages of 13 and 30, surprisingly to many, they're going to make up over half of our workforce by 2020. So obviously it's incumbent on us to connect with this group of individuals. We have to work hard at the insurance industry to appeal to that age group and appealing to their interests and including the ways we interact with them. It's interesting that a number of statistics point to the fact that today less than 1% of all colleges are touched through traditional campus recruiting. What we're learning is that it's time for us to set aside some of our traditional ways of thinking and doing things to better accommodate this emerging workforce. Part of the reason for that 1% is simply the logistics, the cost involved, and the ability to cover such a wide scope of educational institutions with relatively fewer and fewer resources. So it's important that we not only engage with these young folks more actively, but also provide them with career opportunities on many different levels. So we take our responsibility very seriously when it comes to this emerging workforce population. First of all, we think it's very important to become the industry of choice by taking an active role in promoting awareness and visibility for our industry. I was so delighted to see so many insurance companies come together just for this opportunity today, because it shows that we do care, that we do want to have a voice in shaping our future, and that we're looking for ways to come together to do that. We have to correlate the interests of young professionals with their related career path to ensure that they realize the full scope of opportunities available to them beyond the things that they are customarily exposed to or maybe know about from the insurance companies, which is primarily sales and claims. We've got to let them know that there's much more to our industry and to their future than just that. We have to increase our breadth of recruiting efforts to include not only those who have risk management degrees, but also those with associates and high school degrees who can also contribute to our future. It's really interesting that many of our clients are now broadening their perspective and their view on the level of talent that they can use across their enterprise. We need to coach and mentor this emerging talent. It's really incumbent upon us to sell them on long-term career opportunities in the insurance industry. This is what technology, healthcare, education, and the financial sectors have been doing for years. It's why in many of these young people's minds, those are the more glamorous industries to work in. But frankly, a lot of it is just based on the promotion and the advertising that they've done to convince them that that's so. Finally, we need to recognize and grow talent organically, starting with early learning and progressing all the way through graduation. We simply can't wait till this impending skills gap becomes a critical problem. So, just to sum up, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. It's not just incumbent on a few of us, it's incumbent upon all of us to kind of stem the tide of what promises to be a serious problem as our baby boomer population begins to retire. So it's just wonderful to see everybody taking part in this initiative. So thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you, Dave. That was a really great overview. And now we will turn things over to Buffy and Klaus from Change the Equation. If you guys would also just mind introducing yourself and get started, that would be great.
Oh, thank you so much, Kirsten. And hello to everyone on the call. Before we get started, I just wanted to thank Kirsten so much for this opportunity and for her very, very kind introduction to Change the Equation for all of you today. My name is Buffy DeBrow-Watts, as she mentioned, and I am the Director of Member Engagement here at Change the Equation. We are based in Washington, D.C., and are a membership organization comprised of corporate CEO members who are all very committed to promoting STEM education on a national level. I am going to go through a little bit about what we do as we move forward with the presentation. But before I do that, I'm going to allow my colleague here to introduce himself as well.
Yes, hi. I'm also delighted to have this opportunity. My name is Klaus von Zastrow. I'm the COO and Director of Research for Change the Equation. And what I'm going to do then is take you through some more data about what's happening in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, education, what that might mean for your industry as you look for skilled people in the future, and some things that can be done about it.
Alrighty, so I guess we'll go ahead and move forward right now. So, today, Klaus and I really want to talk to you all about the STEM pipeline because I think as we've heard, you all are starting to, as an industry, have some concerns about the future of your workforce. And so before we do that, I want to talk to you a little bit more about Change the Equation and what we do. Change the Equation is a nonprofit, nonpartisan CEO-led initiative, and as I mentioned before, very committed to improving STEM learning here in the United States. At Change the Equation, we do that three ways. The first way is advocating for change, and what we mean by that is that we work to promote proven state policies and promote those policies and best practices in STEM education. The other thing we work with our members to do is to improve philanthropy as it relates to STEM learning and increase the impact of corporate philanthropy in that arena. And our third goal is to inspire young people. We want to make sure that young people have the appropriate education in STEM fields and that their imaginations are open so that we can continue to be the leaders in innovation in our country. And in this slide, we want to give you just an overview of who our members are. I mean, some of them you may be very familiar with, and I believe we may have one of our members on the call with us today. So when you look at that list of corporations, you might say, why are all of these major corporations involved with Change the Equation and K-12 STEM learning? And I will tell you that primarily quite a few of our members want to develop a strong workforce, and they want to make sure that students at the secondary and post-secondary level at graduation are ready to come into their workforce with a solid foundation in STEM education. They also know from an employee recruitment perspective that they want good schools for their employees, and good schools with a good comprehensive STEM education program will help them to attract and retain good employees. Our members also want to be certain that they're doing good things on the corporate social responsibility side. So supporting STEM learning is one of the ways that all of our members approach being good corporate citizens. And then finally, our members are concerned with the U.S. economy and making it as prosperous as possible. And that is why they affiliate and join Change the Equation. It's also good for you all to know that Change the Equation members don't just join an organization, but they make sure that they put their money where their mouth is. And our members have invested more than $750 million in STEM education, and they do so on an annual basis. One of the things that Change the Equation provides to its members is some tools and recommendations on how to be certain that the philanthropy dollars that corporations are investing are having a significant impact on K-12 STEM learning.
And so Buffy has just handed the baton to me, and so what I'm going to do is tell you a bit more about what we've seen in the current environment that's going to affect the insurance industry, but many other industries besides. And I think it's fair to say that while it's very important, I think, for the insurance industry to change its image and to try to attract more students in STEM, at the same time, looking across industries, we have to begin improving the set of skills of young people, particularly in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, so that every industry can thrive. Because even industries like information technology and computer science and areas like that, job opportunities, or rather occupations in those areas, have been struggling. That is to say, employers can't find the talent they need there either. And so everyone's competing for the same talent right now, and that's just not a healthy situation. So for us, one of the big things to do is to go into the K-12 pipeline, as we call it, of skills, and ensure that we're already building that strong foundation in K through 12 education so that there's many more people to choose from in the end. So here what we're looking at is a projection of what jobs prospects are going to be like by the year 2020. And actually, in some ways, this is good news. We're looking at almost half of the 55 million job openings that will happen in about the next decade will be new positions. That's 24 million new positions. A lot of them are going to be retirements, as we mentioned earlier. I know that's going to hit the insurance industry very hard in the next 15 years. And as you look at who's going to be hiring for those positions, the 3 of the 4 biggest areas are going to be focused in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So those jobs that we classify as STEM jobs, there are jobs in healthcare which require a very strong STEM background. So in a sense, the insurance industry is going to be competing for people with these other areas. Now, I know you've got some STEM occupations in the insurance industry as well, but there's going to be a lot of competition for this work, and that's going to be very, very challenging as the road down the road ahead. Another point to keep in mind is that recent research has suggested that many jobs that we don't classify as STEM jobs require STEM skills more than ever in the past. I'm sure you've noticed that in your own industry, but for example, in the advertising industry, marketing, many more jobs than before require people to do that kind of analytics. So they're looking for a different profile of candidate. So companies that in the past never hired people in STEM are now looking for those people. They're becoming a very, very scarce commodity. Added to this is the fact that the future workforce is going to require more and more education. So what you see on the screen right now is, in a sense, a timeline of what percentage of the workforce needed a bachelor's and above or an associate's and above. And we find that over time, that percentage grew dramatically. In 1973, it was much less than half. Now, in 2018, it's projected to be substantially more than half. So we're going to have more educated workers in total across all industries. So we created some member tools to help our members come to grips with this. And I'll start with the first of these, which we call vital signs. These vital signs are state-by-state reports on the condition of STEM learning. The idea is we wanted to give our companies a way of orienting themselves against what's happening right now in their own states and where they operate, so that they can make decisions about how best to address this challenge and be better and stronger advocates for policies and practices that will help solve the challenge. You can get these on our website. They're open to anyone at vitalsigns.changetheequation.org, and I'll go back to that later. You can get 50 indicators per state, or you can download what you have here on the screen, these 4-page summaries of what's happening in any given state. They can be invaluable tools for people who want to start advocating for change. So as we looked at the states and we looked at STEM learning in the states, several very big themes emerged. First of all is the one you've already heard, and that is that the demand for skills already exceeds the supply, and it's only going to get worse. The second is, if we look back into our STEM pipeline, right, the pipeline of kids coming through school, we're not developing the talent we need right now in general for insurance or any other industry. The third is that higher expectations of students, so we're setting higher standards now for what students should know and be able to do, are coming down the pike, and they're going to have a seismic impact on schools and education. And companies have a strong role to play there to ensure that we stand strong on high standards. I'll say a bit more about that later. And finally, as we ratchet up the bar, right, as we expect more of students, that they have to learn more to have a greater set of skills, that also means that schools, teachers, and students are going to need strong support, and the corporate community can become a strong voice for ensuring that that happens in states. So let me linger for a moment on the question of STEM demand. We've talked about the demand for skills being great in the future. What we looked at here was we looked at what the demand for STEM skills was from 2009 to 2012. So those were not particularly robust years for the U.S. economy, and you'd expect that demand was down. Well, what we found was pretty striking. If you look at the right side of the screen, you'll see what happened if you were unemployed in those 3 years and you were in a non-STEM, you had a non-STEM background. That is, you didn't have a previous job in STEM, you didn't have that foundation. Well, there were about almost 4 unemployed people for every 1 job opening, which is grim. That was not very good odds for people who were unemployed. However, if you had a background in STEM and you were unemployed during that period, there were almost 2 jobs for every unemployed person in STEM. So in other words, 2 STEM jobs for every unemployed person in STEM. And I think this really supports what we've been hearing from our companies, and that is that they can't find the talent they need even at a time of high unemployment. So they've not been able to rest on their laurels or to feel like the problem isn't urgent. It's urgent, and it was urgent all along. So we see that this is the demand. We see also that we're not developing the STEM talent we need. Now, I should start with some good news, right? Moderately good news. Here you see that scores have been going up in this country over the last 20 years. And I'll show you about, these are the last 8 years I have up here, but scores in math and in science have been going up steadily. So some of the work and a lot of the work and advocacy that have been taking place so far have made a difference. The fact is, though, that scores have been going up very slowly. So you'll see here they went up from 276 points on the National Assessment of Education Progress in 8th grade math, and to 283 points. That translates to 7 points, which is a little bit more than a whole grade level, a whole year's worth of learning. So that's a substantial gain that students have made. But they're still very far from the proficient mark, which is at 299. On average, students in this country are not proficient in math. Now we know we can do better as a country. And if you look, for example, so this is the 7-point gain that I talked about in the United States. Look at one state as an example of what that state did. This is Massachusetts. Massachusetts made a 12-point gain in the same time frame. And they made it after starting from a higher base. So what this is proof of concept. We know that certain states that really set their minds to this and enact the right policies and do the right things can raise the average level. So the average level of proficiency in Massachusetts is proficient. The average kid in Massachusetts is proficient. This doesn't mean every kid in Massachusetts is proficient. They too still have a long way to go. But it shows how far they've come. And what the thing we have to look at here is what Massachusetts did to promote these gains is they set very high standards for what students should know and be able to do. They set a very high bar for what kinds of scores students had to get on their state tests to prove that they had already gained those skills and that knowledge. And then they helped teachers with all kinds of materials and support so that teachers could bring students to that higher bar. And they did it systematically, and they did it single-mindedly for 20 years. And they've had 20 years of stunning growth, and they are still the highest performing state in the nation. And in fact, we look at recent international data, Massachusetts scored on par with Japan. If Massachusetts were its own country, it would be one of the highest scoring countries in the world. So this is what we see right now to add to this problem. We have a very leaky pipeline through our whole education system. So right now the high school graduation rate is under 80%. So that means 2 out of every 10 kids does not graduate high school in 4 years. And if you don't have a high school degree, there's not much you can do anymore. If we look at the 4-year college graduation rate, of those students who actually graduate high school and go to 4-year college, only slightly more than half graduate within 6 years. And you know what? If they don't graduate within 6 years, they probably don't graduate at all. That's an enormous supply of lost talent. Look at the 2-year college graduation rate, even worse. Less than a third graduate from 2-year colleges with a degree in less than 3 years. Again, an enormous leak from the pipeline. And of all of those people who graduate in STEM fields with certificates or 4-year degrees or 2-year college degrees, only about 10% get those degrees in STEM fields. We know we have to widen that pipeline. One of the big problems that we have right now that I think companies like yours and any other have to be very attuned to is the fact that there's a huge percentage of our population that remains untapped. So what I'm showing you here is that about half of the population in the United States are women. So they're half the population, but they receive only 31% of the STEM degrees and certificates awarded in this country. That's an enormous gap. That is a lot of squandered talent in STEM. The same thing is happening with minorities, people of color. They represent 30% of the college-age population, yet they get only 15% of the STEM degrees and certificates. When you add all of this up, right, that adds up to hundreds, more than 100,000 new STEM degrees and certificates every year that are being lost because these groups are underrepresented in the STEM workforce. And that's a very big problem, but also an opportunity to focus on these groups to try to increase the amount of talent in the pipeline. So one of the other things that we've done to try to increase the talent in the pipeline is help companies with the work that they're doing in their own philanthropy so that they can be more effective and have a greater return on investment. And so we created a set of what we call design principles for effective STEM philanthropy that will help companies begin to measure how well they're doing, but also possibly how well those organizations that they support will be doing in increasing the amount of the number of STEM skills coming through the pipeline. So this is an example of one of the documents we created. I won't go through this in exhaustive detail, but we have a rubric that shows a number of things that companies should be looking for as they look for a really promising or strong program to improve STEM skills. This is one area of it. This is what we call underrepresented groups. Programs should really try to address the need of those underrepresented groups. That was the women and minorities we were just talking about. And so in the rubric, to help companies really figure out what represents quality in what they're looking at, we've shown what an accomplished program does. Here's just one example. They demonstrate that they're effectively reaching underrepresented groups through their very targeted recruitment efforts. Because we find a lot of programs out there that say they're dealing with students of color or they're trying to focus on girls, but we have no evidence that they're actually recruiting those communities or getting to them. An undeveloped program has no such recruitment efforts. And unfortunately, most of the programs we see fall in the undeveloped category in this area. I won't go into too much depth in STEMworks here. There's a database we've created of effective STEM programs to help companies look at what's already working and what has a proven track record. We call it STEMworks. Companies can get at it online from our website. They can search by content area, by the area of the country where the program is active, by the target audience the program tries to reach, and get a list of programs that have met our very high principles for effectiveness. So this is something, again, that is free and open to all the world that we think can help companies increase the return on their investments in improving STEM learning. And so that's the searchable area. We've also done some work now to identify a subset of those very effective programs that are ready to expand to all kinds of new places across the country. I won't go into extreme depth here, but the programs you can learn more about on our website are Project Lead the Way, that focuses on getting kids really exposed to engineering already in middle and high school so that they can be much more interested in engineering, but more importantly, do a lot more hands-on kind of learning that cements and solidifies their understanding of math and science. We have the 1080 Student Racing Challenge, which is a competition among students where students can actually get involved with radio-controlled cars, and they do a lot of work in engineering and project management, program management, and things so that they can then race these cars against one another and in the process learn a great deal of math and science. We have Girl Start Summer Camp, which is a special week-long program for girls that gets them very focused on STEM early on when they need to be inspired. In the middle school years primarily, that's when girls sort of fall off the STEM wagon. And then we have ST Math, which is a program, a computer program that can be used with elementary schools and elementary school students to help them better understand spatial relationships. That's fun, and it really has fantastic outcomes in STEM learning. So students do much better after they've been through that program. So before I hand it back over to Buffy, I wanted to say one more thing. An area where our companies have been very active and where we in particular at Change the Equation have been helping them become active is in advocating for something called Common Core state standards. I mentioned earlier that standards are going up. What's happened is that states from across the country have come together to create a set of standards for what students should know and be able to do by the time they graduate that in many cases are much higher than what states have had so far. And they're coming together to create tests that will truly assess whether kids have reached these standards. That we think could be a game changer. That is something that is really setting the groundwork for a lot of different reforms in states as they look at how to align their systems around these newer, more important goals and then support all the players in the system to ensure that they can meet those goals. There's been a lot of storm and stress right now in states over these standards. One big reason is going to be once the standards are truly in effect and students are tested according to the higher bar, test scores are going to fall. In other words, fewer students are going to, quote unquote, pass the test. It's going to be really important for people out there right now to say this doesn't mean that schools have gotten worse or that your child is doing worse. It means that the expectations we're setting for what that child needs to do and needs to know to be able to get into college but also then be successful in the workforce is much more realistic now than it ever was. By realistic, I mean it's aligned to actual demands. This is what we need to prepare our students for the stresses of the workforce and for the challenges that will face them once they graduate. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Buffy, who's going to wrap things up.
Thank you, Klaus. So I know that now, since you all have gotten a better overview of Change the Equation, you're probably wondering, again, what else, why else do corporations really want to join Change the Equation? And the primary reason that so many of our members want to choose or elect to become members is because, number one, they want access and in-depth training on the use of our member tools, but also they want to become part of a national coalition. When they bond together, they have a huge social corporate capital and can make a significant impact on STEM learning together. The CEO members and their designees are also very committed to supporting K-12 STEM learning. So it is an opportunity to actually interact with like-minded individuals who are all supporting a similar cause. And one of the things that we encourage our members to do, and quite a few of them are doing, and the scalable programs that Klaus just mentioned, is they're increasing their corporate impact on STEM learning because they actually start to partner or pull all of their philanthropy efforts, or at least percentages of them, together so that they can expand the reach of a specific program or the access to it that will dramatically impact and further develop students so that there's a stronger workforce that's available to you and to them as in the future. And also, Change the Equation members, they like to have the access to the other CEOs so that they can learn about different practices they've had in place, projects, and what's coming from other companies so that they can, in turn, develop their own portfolios. So I know we've got a question-answer period that's going to be coming up, but after that, if any of you all would like to have more information on Change the Equation or any of the information presented, I'm just going to provide you with my email address at bdwatts@changetheequation.org and also Klaus's email address at klausvonzastro@changetheequation.org. Also, we've got our email addresses, our web address, and Facebook and Twitter accounts. You can catch us on Facebook and Twitter, and we've got all kinds of STEMtistics that you can use daily and also learn a little bit more about STEM education. So, Kirsten, thank you, and I think Klaus and I are both ready to entertain any questions.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation, and now we're going to have Dax Craig, CEO of Valen Analytics, sort of lead us through a Q&A and discussion period. So Dax, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Kirsten. And Klaus and Buffy, thank you for an outstanding job outlining how companies can think strategically about the tie between education and the pain we're feeling finding qualified analytics talent or STEM type talent. And Dave, also thank you for presenting the salient points that highlight the size of the talent issue in the insurance industry and why it makes perfect sense from a macro standpoint to work together to find a better solution. You know, one of the things I know from running a data and analytics company in our industry is that the most talented people out there, you know, particularly those in data science and analytics, know they have almost infinite career opportunities, and they also very much consider the overall industry before accepting an offer. They want to know what their career path will be when talking to us. You know, where can I go in the insurance industry, as an example? You know, a common theme we hear in talking with insurance carriers that are leading the way in adopting data and predictive analytics is that they too struggle with the human side of becoming a more analytically driven organization, both in terms of the cultural change management that has to happen, and also finding new skill sets they need on all fronts, whether it's on the business side, getting the business side to be more analytically driven, or it's to build data, analytics, and IT departments internally. And that's really the biggest reason that Valen has gotten involved with Change the Equation and has introduced this initial framework. We want to create a message that's going to resonate with the next generation of talent about the exciting career opportunities available in our industry, in insurance, and to help point out that this industry really is on the precipice of big innovative breakthroughs, particularly as it relates to data, analytics, and mathematics. And we think it's all in all of our best interest to do a better job attracting top-tier talent to the industry. So many of you might be wondering what the next steps are, and we'd like to start with an open discussion here on the phone today on Q&A session. And then following this session, you'll each receive a brief survey to gauge your interest in participating in an initial planning meeting that will help us outline the path forward. It's not our intention to boil the ocean, but rather to facilitate a way for the industry as a whole to get started with something that's reasonable and doable as next steps. So right now we're going to unmute everyone's phone lines, but if you could mute your own phone lines so we don't have tons and tons of background noise, that will allow you to chime in whenever you like. So I do want to kick off the Q&A session with a question I have for Change the Equation. Given that the insurance industry is facing a very large talent shortage and is frankly behind the curve in terms of reaching the college talent about to enter the workforce, I wonder if you can elaborate a bit more on high school to also focus now on K-12 education. Can you share your experience in working with other industries that have been more focused on college recruitment and why that doesn't necessarily produce the results they need or expect if this is their only area of focus?
I think that's an excellent question because it's true in a lot of industries, in a lot of companies, they feel like their urgency is they're feeling the urgency right now. They need people now. And if they need people now, they're going to go to not only to universities, but to top-tier universities and try to compete for those people. Or they're going to try to sort of get a set of particularly talented youngsters into university who later on can be a strong source of labor and talent for them. That's great. It's fine. And I think it's very valuable, and companies should keep doing that. But the challenge is what we've seen right now and recently in the data is that more and more industries need the same kind of people. So while someone who had STEM skills, so very strong quantitative skills and technological skills in years past may have been suitable for a relatively small subset of occupations, nowadays they're in demand across tons of occupations in tons of industries, which means that they're much scarcer. And so if companies focus on higher ed, they're not going downstream far enough really to create the kind of supply of talent they're going to need. All they're going to do is they're going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? They're going to be competing with each other, and sometimes they'll win, and sometimes they'll lose. But I think right now, from a macro perspective, we think that companies that focus downstream in K-12 and really build that pipeline of talent coming up into the universities, even if those people aren't necessarily majoring in quote-unquote a STEM field, but if they have a very strong quantitative background, they'll find that their pain over the long term is going to ease. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that did. Chris,
Yeah,
wanted to add on.
and I just need to add on, I mean, I think the point is is a really good one. And so as we talk about having an initial planning session, it's really kind of attacking this on two fronts. What are we going to do to create a message that resonates with people about to enter the workforce, that we're part of that game, which we might not be today, and at the same time realize that doing that alone is going to have mixed results because there's just not enough of that talent to go around. So if we can figure out kind of a two-pronged approach, it seems to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, thanks for those answers. Are there others on the line that are brave enough to ask a question to a group? Love to hear from you. We have limited bravery in the insurance community. See, that's one thing we got to tackle. So I have a question for the group, and is there anyone that can share their experience with the fierce competition for qualified talent, particularly data science, analytics type talent, math type talent? Anyone willing to share? So I can tell you that from our perspective, when we are hiring, predictive modelers or data people, Java programmers, we have to move so incredibly fast, and it's almost like it was in the late 90s during the tech bubble, where if you had Java in your resume, you had 5 job offers as soon as you hit the street. Well, the same is true for data and analytics talent, but it's not 5 job offers; it's 10. And we're competing against companies like Google or IBM or whatnot for this kind of talent, and it is very difficult, and we have to move very fast. Not only do we want highly talented people, but we want them to fit culturally, and so it is quite the challenge for us, and part of what is driving us to do this.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were, as we mentioned earlier, when we launched Tomorrow's Talent Challenge as a concept, we were at the Insurance Analytics Symposium in Boston, and a CEO had a presentation specifically on analytics talent, and they've had to make the decision to remove all salary caps when it has to do with data analytics or IT talent because they just can't compete. And he was saying they have to move very, very quickly. Not only that, they've actually put together their own internal, basically, university so that once they attract that talent, they can develop it and retain it. And he was just saying that HR is one of the most strategic areas of focus for their organization because it has to be in order for them to move and evolve to kind of become a more analytically driven company, which is what they've decided to do. So it was really interesting. And I'm guessing some of you on the line might have similar experiences when you find someone you think will be great and then bringing them in, you can find yourself competing quite a bit.
Oh yeah, once they're in, the job isn't over. They have recruiters contacting them daily, and so you have to provide, a fantastic environment for them to stay. Yeah, I wonder, Dave at Jacobson, if you could share other examples you've seen where the insurance industry has collaborated to recruit talent. If I'm not mistaken, Jacobson has some past experience that might serve as a good example.
Yeah, and I also wanted to just kind of echo the comment that you made, Dex, about moving quickly on this talent. One of the things that we find is, especially this younger generation of workers, they thrive on immediate feedback. And if you look at their social networking patterns and that sort of thing, they communicate at amazing rates of speed. And so to your point, that is one thing that we see as well, that when we, top talent is always going to be in high demand. There's no doubt about it. But the competition for that is one thing, but how the individual perceives those that are, courting him or her is also vitally important, because they've got options. And, it's interesting that since we launched our Emerging Talent Program, we had the wonderful opportunity to interact with a lot of young men and women, and at various different levels in many different walks of life. And what we find is that they don't necessarily have a negative opinion about the insurance industry as much as they have no opinion at all. And so we spend a good bit of our time kind of coaching them and mentoring and nurturing their view of the industry, because we think it's incumbent upon us to do so. That we haven't done a good job of educating them. We haven't done a good job of promoting the industry. We haven't done a good job of being in their lives. And so we have to do that now. And what we're finding is that their minds are very much open to us as an industry. What we have to do is draw a correlation between their areas of interest or their field of study and opportunities for them in the industry. I can't tell you how many people we talk to that, while STEM backgrounds are easy targets for the insurance industry, there's others like public relations, marketing, communications, behavioral sciences. These are things that these young men and women never thought would even apply to an industry that they know little about. So we've had some great success in just developing, if not just a small, but a groundswell of interest. And that's what we're trying to capitalize on now. Now, what we're looking for is outlets. Obviously, we need jobs to place them in. We can't go along creating interest without creating opportunities as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful to hear your perspective. I know personally, when I graduated college, there was one woman that had a job with Chubb, and she was put on this incredible pedestal because she had this amazing underwriting training job with Chubb. And I compare that to friends of mine that have college-age kids, and there was one person at TCU that got a job with Google out of the graduating class, and that person was put on the kind of pedestal that I remember about Chubb. And oh, how times have changed. And we've got to find a way to get back to that.
Great. Well, we're sort of at the end of our time, and just to sort of wrap up, first of all, thank you, Dave, from Jacobson for presenting, and thank you to Klaus and Buffy for really bringing the industry up to speed in terms of what other national companies and leading organizations and CEOs are doing. I think it was incredibly helpful and insightful, so thank you again so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. As Dax mentioned, we will send a very short survey just to get some insights and feedback from the group that attended and the group that lots of people who are interested but couldn't attend today. And talk about how we might want to just have a planning meeting to talk about next steps around a message that's going to work for the talent that's entering the workforce today, and how we think about making sure we've got the workforce that we need long term. So look for that email. We'll look for your responses, and we'll move things forward. So thank you again for your time. That concludes today's webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirsten.